Jake Collins wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished repairing the water pump behind the colony's main hall. The machine hummed back to life, sending fresh water through the pipes that fed Haven Colony's 1,000 residents. He packed his tools into his worn leather bag and stood up, stretching his back. "Thanks again, Jake," called Mayor Pete Johnson from across the courtyard. "Don't know what we'd do without you around here." Jake nodded and gave a small wave. He picked up his bag and walked toward home, taking the long way through the market square. The evening air was cool, and the smell of roasted corn and fresh bread filled his nose. Children ran between the stalls while their parents bought supplies for tomorrow's harvest festival. He stopped at Dr. Helen Ross's medical clinic to check on old Mrs. Patterson, who had hurt her leg last week. The doctor smiled when she saw him through the window and waved him inside. "She's doing much better," Helen said, closing her patient files. "The bone is healing nicely. You did good work setting that splint." "Just basic field medicine," Jake replied. "Nothing special." Helen looked at him with curious eyes. She had been the colony's doctor for 8 years, but Jake had only arrived 5 years ago with his daughter Amy. He never talked about their life before Haven Colony, and she had learned not to ask too many questions. Jake left the clinic and walked home to the small house he shared with Amy. It sat on the edge of town, with a good view of the surrounding hills and the forest beyond. The house was simple but well built, with solar panels on the roof and a small garden in the back where Amy grew vegetables for their dinner table. He found Amy sitting at the kitchen table, her nose buried in a thick book about alien biology. Her long brown hair fell across her face as she took notes in her careful handwriting. She looked up when he came in, her green eyes bright with excitement. "Dad, look at this," she said, pointing to a picture in her book. "The Kalari have 3 different types of blood cells. That's why they can survive in so many different environments. Isn't that amazing?" Jake looked at the image of the lizard-like aliens and felt something cold move in his stomach. He had hoped Amy would never need to know about the Kalari or any of the other dangerous species that filled the galaxy beyond their peaceful colony. "Pretty interesting," he said, trying to keep his voice normal. "But don't you think you should get ready for the festival tomorrow? The whole colony will be there." Amy closed her book and grinned. "I'm already ready. Mrs. Kim finished my new dress this morning. Want to see it?" She ran to her room and came back wearing a simple blue dress with small white flowers. She spun around once, her face glowing with happiness. Jake felt his heart squeeze tight in his chest. At 16, Amy was growing into a beautiful young woman, smart and kind like her mother had been. "You look perfect," he said. "Your mom would be proud." Amy's smile softened. She walked over and hugged him tight. "I miss her too, Dad." They ate dinner together as the sun set behind the hills. Amy talked about her plans to apply to the Galactic University next year. She wanted to study xenobiology and maybe work for the diplomatic corps someday. Jake listened and nodded, but inside he worried. The galaxy was a dangerous place, full of pirates and slavers and worse things. Haven Colony was safe and quiet, far from the trade routes and conflict zones. He wanted Amy to stay here forever, but he knew she had dreams that were bigger than their small world. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He got up and walked to his workshop in the basement, a room Amy rarely entered. Hidden behind a false wall was equipment that didn't belong in a simple colonist's home. Advanced scanners, encrypted communication devices, and other tools from his old life. He turned on the scanner and ran a routine check of the space around their planet. The screen showed normal traffic. A few cargo ships passing through the outer system, some mining drones working the asteroid belt, nothing unusual. Jake was about to turn off the scanner when he saw something that made his blood freeze. 3 ships running silent and dark, moving toward Haven Colony. The scanner's computer identified them as Kalari raiders, Jake ran upstairs and shook Amy awake. "Get up," he said urgently. "Get dressed and pack a bag, now." Amy sat up, confused and scared. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Just do what I say, stay away from the windows." Jake grabbed his emergency kit from under his bed and checked his sidearm, a weapon he had hoped never to use again. Through the bedroom window, he could see lights in the sky growing brighter. The raider ships were coming in fast and low, using the hills to hide their approach. The first explosions came from the center of town. Jake heard screams and saw flames rising from the market square. Energy weapons lit up the night as the Kalari attackers swept through the colony. Jake knew what they wanted. Young humans brought high prices in the slave markets of the Outer Rim. "Amy, we have to go," Jake said. But when he turned around, she was gone. He ran through the house calling her name. Through the front window, he saw her running toward town, toward the sounds of battle and terror. She was trying to help, trying to reach the medical clinic where Dr. Ross would be treating the wounded. Jake cursed and ran after her, but he was too late. A Kalari transport ship landed in the town square, its ramp dropping to reveal armed raiders in combat armor. They moved through the panicking colonists with brutal efficiency, stunning anyone who fought back and grabbing the youngest and strongest. Humans. Jake saw Amy trying to help a fallen child when a Kalari warrior spotted her. The alien raised his stun weapon, and Amy collapsed to the ground. Two more raiders grabbed her and carried her toward their ship. Jake fought his way through the chaos, using skills he had buried years ago. His fists moved like hammers, breaking bones and crushing windpipes. The colonists around him stared in shock as their quiet maintenance man became something else entirely, something deadly and precise. But there were too many enemies and too much confusion. Jake watched helplessly as the transport ship lifted off with Amy and a dozen other young colonists inside. The raider ships disappeared into the night sky, leaving Haven Colony burning behind them. Jake stood in the smoking ruins of the market square, his peaceful life shattered forever. Dr. Ross found him there an hour later, standing perfectly still among the wreckage. "Jake," she said softly, "who are you really?" Jake looked at her with eyes that had gone cold and hard. "Someone I hoped I'd never have to be again." Jake walked through the ruins of his house in the early morning light. The Kalari raiders had destroyed most of the colony before leaving with their prisoners. Smoke still rose from burned buildings, and broken glass covered the streets. 23 people were dead, and 15 young colonists were gone, including Amy. He moved through his home like a sleepwalker, seeing the overturned furniture and shattered windows. Amy's xenobiology book lay open on the kitchen floor, its pages torn and dirty. Jake picked it up carefully and closed it, holding it against his chest for a moment. Then he went to his basement workshop. Jake pulled away the false wall panel and stared at the equipment he had hidden there for 5 years. Military-grade weapons, advanced communication gear, battle armor, and identity documents with names he had tried to forget. At the back of the hidden space sat a metal case he had never wanted to open again. He entered his old access codes, and the case opened with a soft hiss. Inside was the black combat suit of a ghost operative, the most feared special forces unit in human space. The suit's smart fabric could bend light around him, making him nearly invisible. Built-in systems could enhance his speed, strength, and reflexes to superhuman levels. Jake had worn this suit during the Centauri Rebellion, when he single-handedly infiltrated the rebel stronghold on Proxima Station and ended a war that had killed millions. The newspapers called him a hero. The military gave him medals, but Jake knew the truth. He was just a very good killer. After the war, Jake had faked his own death and disappeared. He was tired of killing, tired of being a weapon. He wanted a normal life, maybe even a family someday. Then he met Sarah, a colony doctor who saw something good in him despite his dark past. They married and had Amy, and for 16 years, Jake had been just a father and a maintenance worker. Now Sarah was dead from a disease the colony couldn't cure. And Amy was gone, taken by aliens who would sell her to the highest bidder. Jake's peaceful life was over. He put on the ghost suit and felt it come alive around him, sensors linking with his nervous system, weapon systems running diagnostic checks. The suit's computer recognized his biometrics and welcomed him back with a soft chime. Jake looked at himself in the workshop's mirror and saw the ghost again, a figure of black death that had once made entire armies surrender. Jake activated his communication equipment and sent out a coded message on an old smuggler frequency. Within an hour, he received a reply. Ben Carter was still alive and still running his salvage operation from a base in the asteroid belt. 2 days later, Jake stood on the landing pad of Carter's hidden facility, watching his old friend walk toward him with a shocked expression. Ben was older now, his hair gray and his face lined with scars from a dozen dangerous jobs. But his eyes were still sharp and his handshake was still firm. "Jake Collins," Ben said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Or should I call you Ghost? Man, the whole galaxy thinks you're dead. I went to your funeral on Earth. They gave you a hero's burial with full military honors." "Jake Collins is dead," Jake replied. "I need your help, Ben. The Kalari took my daughter." Ben's face went serious. He led Jake into his operations center, a room filled with star charts, communication equipment, and weapon lockers. 3 other people worked at computer stations, tracking cargo ships and monitoring police frequencies. "The Kalari don't usually raid that far into human space," Ben said. "Must have been a special job. Someone paid them good money to hit your colony. Can you track them?" "Maybe. My contacts in the underworld hear things. But Jake, you can't just walk into Kalari space and start shooting. They've got armies, fleets, whole planets under their control." Jake looked at his friend with cold eyes. "I've killed armies before." Ben was quiet for a moment, remembering the stories he had heard about the Ghost's missions during the war. "Okay, but you'll need a ship. And information, and probably some backup." "Just the ship and information. I work better alone." Ben nodded and led Jake to his personal vessel, a fast courier ship called the Lucky Strike. The ship was small but heavily armed, with stealth systems that could hide it from most scanners. "She's yours," Ben said, handing Jake the access codes. "But be careful, old friend. The galaxy's changed since the war. There are new players, new threats. The Kalari aren't the worst things out there anymore." Meanwhile, millions of miles away, Amy Collins sat in a dark cargo hold with 14 other human prisoners. The Kalari ship called Blood Fang was 3 days into its journey to Kepler Station, a notorious trading post where slaves were bought and sold like livestock. Amy had spent the first day crying and the second day planning. She had studied alien biology for years, and she knew things about the Kalari that most humans didn't. They were strong and tough, but they had weaknesses. Their hearing was very sensitive, and certain sound frequencies could cause them pain and disorientation. The youngest prisoner was a 10-year-old boy named Tim from the colony school. He was scared and kept asking for his parents. Amy held him close and whispered that someone would come for them. She didn't know if it was true, but she had to believe it. Commander Vextar, the leader of the raiding party, visited the prisoners on the 3rd day. He was 7 feet tall with green scales and yellow eyes that looked at the humans like they were animals in a zoo. "You will bring good prices at market," he said in broken human speech. "Young humans are popular with many species. Some want workers, some want pets, some want other things." Amy stared at the alien commander and memorized his face. If she ever got the chance, she would kill him herself. That night, as the Blood Fang jumped through hyperspace toward Kepler Station, Amy began teaching the other prisoners everything she knew about their captors. She showed them where to hit a Kalari to cause maximum damage, how to recognize their weapons, and how to move quietly in the ship's corridors. My dad will come for us, she told them. But when he does, we need to be ready to help ourselves. The other prisoners looked at her with hope and fear. They didn't know who Jake Collins really was, but Amy had grown up hearing bedtime stories about heroes who fought monsters in the dark spaces between stars. She never knew those stories were about her own father, but she was about to find out. Jake's first stop was Black Rock Station, a criminal outpost built inside a dead asteroid. The station was home to smugglers, pirates, and information brokers who traded in secrets and stolen goods. Jake had raided places like this during the war, but now he needed their help. The Lucky Strike docked at Bay 17, between a drug runner's ship and a vessel that probably carried illegal weapons. Jake walked through the station's dark corridors, his ghost suit stealth systems making him nearly invisible. He moved like a shadow, listening to conversations and watching for his targets. He found his first lead in a dirty bar called the Broken Bottle. 3 Kalari pirates sat at a corner table, drinking and bragging about their recent raids. Jake waited until they left the bar, then followed them into an empty cargo bay. The aliens never saw him coming. Jake disabled their weapons with quick strikes, then grabbed the largest one by the throat. The Kalari warrior was twice his size, but Jake's suit gave him the strength to lift the alien off the ground. "The Blood Fang," Jake said quietly. "Where is it going?" The Kalari tried to fight, but Jake squeezed harder. The alien's yellow eyes showed fear as he realized he was dealing with something far more dangerous than a normal human. "Kepler Station," the alien gasped. "Commander Vextar sells prisoners there. Please do not kill me." Jake dropped the alien and disappeared back into the shadows. Within minutes, word was spreading through the station's criminal network. Someone was hunting Kalari pirates, and that someone was very good at it. Meanwhile, aboard the Blood Fang, Amy was putting her escape plan into action. She had convinced the other prisoners to work together, using their combined knowledge to find weaknesses in the ship's security. Tim, the 10-year-old boy, was small enough to crawl through the ventilation system and spy on their captors. "There are only 12 guards," Amy whispered to the others during their daily feeding time. "And they're getting lazy. They think we're too scared to fight back." She had been watching the Kalari crew for days, learning their routines and habits. The guards changed shifts every 8 hours, and there was always a 5-minute gap when the corridors were empty. That would be their chance. Amy had also discovered something interesting about the ship's design. The prisoner hold was right next to the engine room, and the walls between them were not very thick. If they could create enough noise and confusion, they might be able to damage the ship's systems. "When I give the signal," Amy told the others, "everyone start screaming as loud as you can. Make the worst noise possible. The Kalari have sensitive hearing, and it will hurt them." That same day, Jake arrived at his second target, a space station called Haven's Rest. The name was ironic since it was anything but restful. The station was a meeting place for criminals from across the galaxy, and Jake knew he would find more information there. He found what he was looking for in the station's black market area. A nervous alien trader named Scrix dealt in stolen goods and information. Jake cornered him in his shop, appearing suddenly from the shadows like a ghost. "The Blood Fang," Jake said, his voice cold and mechanical through the suit's voice changer. "Tell me everything you know." Scrix's 4 eyes went wide with terror. He had heard stories about human special forces, but he had never seen one up close. The black-suited figure in front of him looked like death itself. "Vextar's ship," Scrix stammered. "He sells prisoners at Kepler Station every month. Big auction, lots of buyers. The station boss Grax takes a cut of all sales. When is the next auction?" 3 days from now." "But mister, you cannot go there alone. Kepler Station is heavily defended. Hundreds of criminals, all armed and dangerous." Jake dropped a small device on Scrix's counter. "If you warn anyone I'm coming, this will explode and take half the station." With it, Scrix looked at the device and nodded quickly. Jake vanished back into the shadows, leaving the terrified alien to wonder if he had just met a legend. As Jake traveled toward Kepler Station, his reputation began to spread through the criminal underworld. Pirates and smugglers told stories about a ghost in black armor who hunted Kalari raiders. Some said he was a new human weapon. Others claimed he was the spirit of a dead soldier seeking revenge. Captain Lisa Morgan of the Human Defense Fleet was investigating reports of unusual activity in the Outer Rim. Pirates were disappearing, criminal networks were being destroyed, and everyone was talking about a mysterious figure in black armor. Lisa was an experienced officer who had served during the Centauri Rebellion. She had read classified reports about the ghost operative who ended the war, and the tactical pattern she was seeing now looked very familiar. "Run a search on all known ghost operatives," she told her intelligence officer. "Cross-reference with recent criminal activities in sectors 7 through 12. The search results made Lisa's blood run cold. Jake Collins, the legendary ghost, was supposed to be dead. His funeral had been broadcast across human space 5 years ago. But the evidence was clear. Someone with his exact skills and methods was hunting in the Outer Rim. Lisa ordered her ship, the cruiser Vigilant, to set course for Kepler Station. If Jake Collins was really alive, she had to find him before he started a war that could destroy the fragile peace between human and alien worlds. On Kepler Station, a massive criminal bazaar built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, preparations were underway for the monthly slave auction. Grax, the station's boss, was a 10-foot-tall alien who looked like a cross between a bear and a rhinoceros. He had ruled Kepler Station for 20 years through fear and violence. Grax had received word that someone was hunting his business partners. He doubled the station's security and put a bounty on any information about the mysterious attacker. But deep down, he was worried. In his long criminal career, he had learned to fear humans more than any other species. They were unpredictable, ruthless, and when they wanted something, they never gave up. Commander Vextar's ship was due to arrive in 2 days with a fresh cargo of human prisoners. Grax planned to make a fortune from the sale, but first he had to make sure his station was safe from whoever was hunting in the darkness between the stars. What Grax didn't know was that Jake Collins was already on his way, and nothing in the galaxy would stop him from getting his daughter back. Kepler Station looked like a giant metal city floating in space. The asteroid had been carved out decades ago by miners, then taken over by criminals who turned it into the galaxy's biggest black market. Ships of every size and shape docked at its ports, bringing stolen goods, illegal weapons, and slaves to trade. Jake's ship Lucky Strike joined the line of vessels waiting to dock. His ghost suit's computer systems had already hacked into the station's network, giving him maps of the interior and schedules of all incoming ships. The Blood Fang was arriving in 6 hours, just in time for the monthly slave auction. Jake docked at Port 93 and walked into the station. His stealth systems made him nearly invisible, but he still moved carefully through the crowded corridors. Kepler Station was home to 30,000 criminals, and many of them would kill him just for the bounty on human military personnel. The station's central hub was a massive circular chamber 500 feet across. Markets filled the lower levels, selling everything from stolen art to military weapons. The upper levels held bars, gambling halls, and the private offices of crime bosses. At the very top was Grax's throne room, where the station's ruler watched over his criminal empire. Jake made his way to the information brokers district, a maze of small shops where secrets were bought and sold like any other commodity. He found the shop he was looking for, run by a thin alien called Whisper, who specialized in prison layouts and security systems. "The auction house is on level 15, Whisper told him. her 6 arms dancing over multiple computer screens. Heavy. Security, force fields, armed guards. Grax takes his business very seriously. Jake paid for detailed plans of the auction house and the holding cells where prisoners were kept before sale. He also bought information about Grax's personal security and the station's defense systems. The alien looked at him with curious eyes but asked no questions. In her business, curiosity could be deadly. Meanwhile, the Blood Fang docked at Port 7. Commander Vextar supervised the unloading of his human cargo, 15 young prisoners who would bring him a fortune at tomorrow's auction. The Kalari guards prodded the humans with shock sticks, forcing them to walk through the station's corridors. Toward the holding cells, Amy walked in the middle of the group, helping Tim and the other younger prisoners stay calm. She had spent the journey teaching them what to do when the fighting started, because she was certain fighting would come. Her father had always told her that good people never stayed prisoners for long. As they were marched through the station, Amy memorized everything she saw. Guard positions, corridor layouts, emergency exits, weapon lockers. She noticed that many of the aliens they passed looked nervous and jumpy. Word had spread about someone hunting Kalari pirates, and the station's criminals were scared. Captain Lisa Morgan's ship Vigilant dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler Station. She had brought a small fleet with her, 3 destroyers and a squadron of fighters. Officially, they were here to investigate reports of slave trading. Unofficially, Lisa was hunting for Jake Collins. Send a message to the station, Lisa ordered her communications officer. Tell them we're conducting a routine inspection for contraband. Grax received the message in his throne room and snarled with anger. Human warships meant trouble, and he had enough problems already with the mysterious hunter who was killing his business partners. He ordered his security chief to double the guards around the auction house and prepare for possible attack. Jake had found a hiding place in the station's maintenance tunnels, directly below the prisoner holding cells. His suit's sensors could detect 15 human life signs above him, separated by only a few feet of metal deck plating. One of those life signs had to be Amy. He planted small charges along the tunnel walls, enough to blow a hole in the deck when the time came. Then he made his way to the auction house to study its defenses. The security was impressive, but Jake had broken into harder targets during the war. The auction house was a circular chamber with raised seating for buyers and a central platform, where slaves were displayed. Force field projectors lined the walls, and armed guards stood at every entrance. At the back of the room was a private box where Grax would watch the proceedings. Jake found a ventilation shaft that led to the auction house's upper levels. He crawled through the narrow passage until he reached a position directly above the slave platform. From here, he could drop down when the fighting started and reach the prisoners quickly. As night fell on Kepler Station, all the pieces were moving into position. Jake waited in the shadows, checking his weapons and preparing for battle. Amy lay in her cell, whispering final instructions to the other prisoners. Captain Morgan positioned her ships around the station, ready to move at the first sign of trouble. Commander Vextar counted his money and dreamed of the fortune he would make tomorrow. Grax paced in his throne room, his massive claws clicking on the metal floor as he worried about the human warships outside his station. Neither of them knew that death was already walking through their halls, getting closer with every passing hour. In the early morning hours, a young Kalari warrior named Zeph stood guard outside the prisoner cells. He had joined Vextar crew looking for adventure and easy money, but watching the human captives had made him uncomfortable. The youngest prisoner, a small boy, reminded him of his own little brother back on the Kalari homeworld. Zeph heard Amy whispering to the other prisoners and pressed his ear to the cell door. She was telling them a story about heroes who fought against impossible odds and never gave up hope. Her voice was strong and brave, even though she was locked in a cage. Waiting to be sold. For the first time in his life, Zeph began to wonder if what they were doing was right. He looked at his weapon and thought about the choices that had brought him to this place. Tomorrow, when the shooting started, he would have to decide which side he was really on. The station's clocks counted down toward dawn when the auction would begin, and Jake Collins would finally face the aliens who had taken his daughter. The ghost was awake, and Kepler Station would never be the same. The slave auction began at noon, with hundreds of criminals filling the auction house seats. Grack sat in his private box, his massive form draped in expensive robes. Buyers from across the galaxy had come to purchase human slaves, and the crime boss expected to make millions from the sales. Commander Vextar stood beside the auction platform, watching as the first group of prisoners was brought out. Amy and the other colonists were saved for last, since young humans brought the highest prices. The Kalari commander smiled as he thought about his profit. High above in the ventilation shaft, Jake waited for the right moment. His ghost suit's targeting system marked every guard and weapon in the room. He had counted 47 enemies, all armed and dangerous. The odds were against him, but he had faced worse during the war. Amy was brought onto the platform with 5 other prisoners. She stood tall and straight, refusing to show fear even though her heart was pounding. As the auctioneer began describing their qualities to the buyers, Amy caught sight of something moving in the shadows above. Her father had taught her to notice details that others missed, and she saw the faint outline of a figure in the ceiling. "Now we have 6 young humans from a frontier colony," the auctioneer announced. "Perfect for heavy labor or personal service. Bidding starts at 50,000 credits each." The buyers began shouting out bids, treating the prisoners like livestock. Amy felt sick listening to them, but she forced herself to stay calm. Something was about to happen, and she needed to be ready. Jake activated the charges he had planted. In the maintenance tunnels, the explosion shook the entire station as blast holes opened in the deck below the auction house. Emergency alarms started screaming, and the lights flickered as power systems overloaded. At the same moment, Jake dropped through the ceiling vent onto the auction platform. His ghost suit made him look like a creature from a nightmare, a figure of black death that seemed to appear from nowhere. The guards opened fire, but Jake was already moving, faster than any normal human could move. Jake's weapons cut through the Kalari guards like they were made of paper. His suit's enhanced reflexes let him dodge energy blasts that should have killed him. In seconds, half the guards were down, and panic spread through the auction house as buyers scrambled for the exits. "Amy, get down!" Jake shouted as he fought. His way toward the platform, Amy threw herself to the floor and rolled toward the other prisoners. "This way!" she yelled, leading them toward one of the blast holes that had opened in the deck. She had studied the station's layout and knew the holes led to escape routes. Commander Vextar drew his personal weapon, a massive energy rifle that could punch through tank armor. He aimed at Jake and fired, but the ghost was no longer where he had been a second before. Jake appeared behind the Kalari commander like a shadow and grabbed him by the throat. "You took my daughter," Jake said, his voice cold and deadly. "Now you pay." Vextar was twice Jake's size and 3 times his weight, but the ghost suit gave Jake strength beyond human limits. He lifted the alien commander off the ground and threw him across the platform. Vextar crashed into a wall and slumped to the floor, his weapon skittering away. Meanwhile, Captain Morgan's fleet had moved into attack position around Kepler Station. When the explosion started inside the station, she ordered her ships to disable the station's weapons and prevent any criminal vessels from escaping. "All ships, this is Captain Morgan," she broadcast. "Kepler Station is under human military authority. Any vessel attempting to leave will be destroyed." Inside the station, chaos ruled. Criminals ran through the corridors as emergency systems failed and security barriers came down. Many of them had never seen human military forces in action, and they were terrified by the destruction one man was causing. Amy led the escaped prisoners through the maintenance tunnels, following the route she had memorized during their march to the auction house. Behind them, she could hear the sounds of her father's battle echoing through the station's corridors. They reached an emergency airlock that led to the docking bays. Amy activated the controls she had learned by watching the guards, and the door hissed open. The other prisoners looked at her with amazement and gratitude. "How did you know how to do that?" asked Tim, the young boy from their colony. "My dad taught me to pay attention," Amy replied. "He said you never know when small details might save your life." Back in the auction house, Jake faced Commander Vextar in single combat. The Kalari warrior was skilled and experienced, but Jake had something more important than skill. He had the fury of a father protecting his child. Jake's fists moved like hammers, breaking through Vextar's defenses with brutal efficiency. The alien commander tried to use his natural weapons, slashing with razor-sharp claws, but Jake was faster and smarter. He had studied Kalari anatomy during the war and knew exactly where to strike. The fight ended when Jake grabbed Vextar's head and twisted sharply. The alien commander fell to the platform and did not move again. Young Zeph, the Kalari guard, who had been questioning his choices, found Amy and the other prisoners at the docking bay. Instead of trying to stop them, he helped them board an escape pod. "Go," he told Amy quietly, "before more guards come." Amy looked into his yellow eyes and saw something she had not expected to find in their captors. "Thank you," she said. "Maybe your people and mine don't have to be enemies forever." Jake arrived at the docking bay just as the escape pod launched. He watched it fly toward Captain Morgan's fleet, knowing Amy was safe. His mission was complete, but the station was still full of criminals who made their living from human suffering. 3 hours later, Kepler Station was under human military control. Grax and his lieutenants were in prison cells, and the station's slave markets were shut down forever. Captain Morgan found Jake in the ruins of the auction house standing over Vextar's body. "Jake Collins," she said. "The galaxy still needs the ghost." Jake looked at her with tired eyes. "The ghost is dead. I'm just a father who got his daughter back." 6 months later, Jake and Amy had returned to Haven Colony. The settlement was being rebuilt with help from the Human Defense Fleet, and new colonists were arriving every week. Jake had started a security company that protected frontier settlements from pirates and raiders that Amy had decided to study at the Galactic Diplomatic Corps Academy. Her experience as a prisoner had shown her that understanding between species was possible, even after conflict and hatred. On quiet evenings, father and daughter would sit on their porch and watch the sunset over the rebuilt colony. Amy would tell Jake about her studies, and he would share stories from his past that were no longer too painful to remember. "Do you miss the excitement?" Amy asked one evening. Jake looked at his daughter, healthy and safe and full of dreams for the future. "The greatest adventure isn't conquering the galaxy," he said. "It's building something worth protecting." Word had spread through the criminal underworld that human colonies were now under the protection of someone very dangerous. Pirates and slavers began avoiding human space, not knowing exactly who watched over it, but understanding the price of testing those defenses. The ghost was gone, but Jake Collins remained. He was no longer a weapon of war, but a guardian of peace, protecting the families and communities that made life worth living among the stars.